Hi again, Chris Klein, Director of Butterfly Ridge Butterfly Conservation Center here in Southeast Ohio. Coming to you on another chilly day here. Got lots of snow. They're expecting a big batch of something to come in tomorrow. Reports I've heard is we'll get somewhere between 2 inches of rain, 9 feet of snow, and an inch of ice. So hard to tell what we're going to get. That seems to be the way it is nowadays. What I want to talk about in today's episode of Landscaping for Life is monarch butterflies have been in the news a lot here in the last week or two. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation that's going around about monarchs. And so I wanted to set some information straight as far as what's factual and what's maybe a little bit exaggerated, we'll say. And so we're going to kind of jump right into things because we got a whole lot of ground to cover here in the next few minutes. So first off, just so you know where I'm coming from, I started tagging monarch butterflies in 1997 while I was living in Muncie, Indiana. And I tagged for the Monarch Watch organization. They're out of the University of Kansas. And tagged there in Indiana for 3 years, I think it was. And then in 2003, as a staff member at the Boyce Thompson Arboretum in Superior, Arizona, I started what's become known as the Southwest Monarch Study. It was a project to determine the migratory behavior of monarch butterflies in Arizona. And in 2015, I co-authored a paper with Gail Morris and Scott Morris entitled The Status of Danaus plexippus Population in Arizona. That was published in the Journal of the Lepidopterist Society. Once again, that was 2015. And for pretty much that entire time, I've been hearing that the monarch sky is falling. Okay, from 1997 until today. So that's what, 20 something years later. Okay, because perhaps you've been hearing in the news here lately that monarchs are officially going extinct. Okay, and how that got in the news was I'm not sure what it is, whether it's a magazine, an online magazine, a newspaper, or what. It's called SF Gate. It's out of San Francisco. And they published an article here a week or two back. And then that article, in a couple different places, it commented how, well, the article itself was about the fact that the overwintering numbers that were of monarchs that were recorded in California this past Thanksgiving 2018, how the numbers of monarchs butterflies was really, really super low. And then they start throwing around, the E word extinction, the C word catastrophic, that sort of thing. So, like I said, I wanted to kind of set some things straight. First of all, monarchs are not going extinct. Okay. Keep in mind, in North America, there are 4 different populations of monarch butterflies. Okay, there's the western population. That's the population that is generally described as going through their life cycle west of the Rocky Mountains, west of the Continental Divide. And that's the population that the Thanksgiving counts in California. That's the population that they address. There is also an eastern population of monarchs in North America. And so I guess it kind of makes sense that that population is considered east of the Rockies, east of the Continental Divide. That's the population that migrates to the mountains northwest of Mexico City, in the state of Michoacan, Mexico. That population this year actually had quite the banner year. And in fact, they're estimating that the overwintering population in Mexico is going to be the highest since roughly 2008, I think is what they're saying. And I'll try to remember to talk a little bit more about that here in just a few minutes. Also, there is a year-round population of monarchs in Florida. I suspect, although I don't know for sure, maybe somebody, for example, the National Butterfly Center in Mission, Texas, maybe they'll respond to this. I wonder if there's also an year-round population in South Texas as well as Florida, but I don't know that for sure. And then our fourth population is actually probably the population that I am most familiar with, although I know the eastern population pretty well also. And that is the southwestern population. So that's the population that I studied from roughly 2003 until 2009 or 10. So that's monarchs that are found in Arizona, southeast New Mexico, or I'm sorry, southeast Nevada, western New Mexico, southeast California, kind of that Four Corners-y neighborhood, that desert southwest neighborhood. The reason I consider that population distinct from the western population is because the southwestern monarchs, believe it or not, part of our findings that we discovered when we started tagging butterflies, they actually migrate both directions. Okay, southwestern monarchs, some of them go northwest to overwintering sites on the California coast. Some of them go southeast to overwintering sites down in Mexico. And I think that migratory behavior is significantly different enough to call them a distinct population. Now realize, for monarchs to go extinct, every single monarch in each of those four populations would have to go away. Okay, all of them. Also keep in mind there's monarchs in Hawaii and there are monarchs in New Zealand. So for monarchs to go extinct, all of those monarchs have to go away. All of them, every last one of them has to die so that there are no monarchs anywhere. So consequently, I hope you can see how I can confidently sit before you and say monarchs are not going to go extinct. Okay? Now, realistically, monarchs could be extirpated. Okay, that western population in particular, that's when you have a species in a location and then because of whatever, that species is not there anymore. Okay, so for example, here in Ohio, the Karner blue butterfly would be an example for that. The Karner blue was extirpated from Ohio. It still lived in other places, but it wasn't living in Ohio anymore. And then here, I'm not sure exactly what the year was, 15 or 20 years ago, a group of lepidopters here in Ohio went up to Michigan, gathered some eggs, some caterpillars of Karner blue butterflies up there, reintroduced them into Ohio in the oak openings area near Toledo, and so now we have Karner blue butterflies again. Okay, so to say that monarchs are going extinct is a gross misuse of the word. Okay, to say that the western population will be extirpated, that's more reasonable, although I don't think that's going to happen either. Okay, so that's a part of the misinformation that's going around. There is another piece of misinformation, and that's regarding the captive rearing of monarchs. Okay, the Xerxes Society came out with a blog post here a few months back, and I encountered a lot of people who raised monarchs here in Ohio who were on the verge of tears because that Xerxes Society post made them think that they were single-handedly killing and destroying the monarch population. Okay, because basically Xerxes came out and said that it's terrible and wrong for people to be captive rearing monarchs. And interestingly enough, one of the pieces of evidence that Xerxes gave was a scientific paper published in the Journal of the Lepidopterist Society, referenced Morris et al. 2015. Okay, this was their evidence saying that you shouldn't captive raise monarch butterflies. And as I read that post, and you probably have figured out where I'm going here, as I read that post by the Xerces Society, it suddenly struck me, hey, they're referencing my paper. And nowhere in our paper did we say anything about captive raised monarchs being less fit for migrations than wild monarchs, okay? Yet in that blog post, that's exactly what it was saying, is that's what we had said in our paper. Now, how the Xerces folks came to this, they noticed, see, with the Southwest Monarch Study, we tagged wild monarchs throughout Arizona, most of them in southern Arizona, in Pima, Santa Cruz, and Cochise counties. We also tagged captive raised monarchs. You could even, I guess technically you could call them captive bred, okay, but monarchs from a butterfly farm that was shipped to the Desert Botanical Garden in Phoenix as part of educational programming that they were doing, and we tagged those monarchs as well. Well, what Xerces latched onto was the fact that there was a greater recovery rate for our wild tagged monarchs than there was for our captive tagged monarchs. And therefore then Xerces jumped to the assumption that the reason why captive raised monarchs were not recovered in as high of numbers is because they were less fit for the migration. Okay. And I want to point out a couple things with that. First off, the thing that I want to point out, and I think this is in fact what the situation was. Once again, those wild monarchs, they were tagged in very remote locations, okay, throughout southern Arizona. The captive tagged monarchs, every last one of them was released in the Phoenix metropolitan area, where you have lush gardens, okay, full of lantana that bloom all through the winter. If I was a monarch and somebody dropped me into the Phoenix metropolitan area where every other yard has a big planting of lantana, why in the world would I choose to fly 2,000 miles to Mexico or 1,500 miles to California when I've got warm winter temperatures, all the food I can eat sitting right there in front of me where I'm dropped, okay? I would argue the reason that there were fewer farmed monarchs recovered is because the farmed monarchs had no reason to leave Phoenix, and that's why there were fewer of them recovered. You know, something I get a kick out of is realize when a monarch, that migratory generation, when that migratory generation leaves their home for wherever they're migrating to, there's one of three things that's going to happen. Okay, one of these three things has to happen. Number one, the monarch either dies on the way there to the overwintering sites, B, they die at the overwintering site, or 3, they die on the way back from the overwintering sites. Okay, and what I find interesting is that there was this grand assumption that since our monarchs weren't turning up dead in Mexico, that they had to be dying on the way to Mexico. And nobody put even an inkling of thought into the idea that, oh, well, maybe they're dying on the way back, okay, after spending the winter in Mexico. Okay, keep in mind, all the recoveries that are made in Mexico are dead butterflies, okay? And the locals down there go through the dead butterflies on the forest floor. They find the ones with tags. They collect the tags, and then they sell those tags back to scientists that go down there later in the winter. The recoveries in California, on the other hand, those are largely live butterflies. Okay, and people go to California with high-powered cameras, high-powered spotting scopes, and they'll set up and spend an entire day in front of a cluster of monarchs in the trees, scanning those monarchs, looking for tags on their wings. So I guess, like I said, I got a kick out of how there was this assumption that because our farm tagged monarchs, our captive tagged monarchs in Arizona, the fact that they weren't turning up dead in Mexico meant that they were unfit. Okay, I just, like I said, I get a kick out of that. And so that was the logic that was being given to kind of poo-poo the whole captive raising thing. Realize a big part of the problem is there's very, very little data that's out there. Okay, keep in mind the only paper that they had to reference about the behavior of captive raised monarchs versus wild monarchs was my paper. Okay, so there's very, very little data out there, and I think you kind of got to take that with a grain of salt and kind of keep that tucked in the back of your mind. Now, me personally, I see nothing wrong with raising monarchs. Here at Butterfly Ridge, we raised roughly 75 back in this past year, 2018. However, while I don't see anything wrong with raising them, I think you need to do it smartly. Okay, so for example, some of the things that we recommend is, number one, do not collect eggs, don't take in eggs that you find in your milkweed after September 1st. Because that egg that you find after September 1st, keep in mind it's not going to become an adult butterfly until after October 1st. And that's just leaving Ohio or Michigan or wherever, okay, after October 1st, there's no way that butterfly is going to make it to its overwintering site. Okay, it's just not. Okay, it's going to get caught up in a cold front somewhere and it's going to die. I would argue it would be better to leave that egg out in the environment, let the caterpillar hatch, and then he can become spider food or praying mantis food or whatever. Okay, I mean, everybody's got to eat. Secondly, when you run out of milkweed, then stop collecting caterpillars. Okay, easy as that. If you have to go elsewhere, okay, to get enough milkweed to feed the caterpillars that you have, realize from a wildlife management perspective, what you're doing is you're going beyond your carrying capacity, which from an ecosystem perspective, that's not a smart thing to do. So once you run out of milkweed from your site where you collect these caterpillars, once you run out of milkweed to feed them, you have to stop collecting caterpillars. Okay? And then I know I've heard stories of some people who they run out of milkweed, so they package up their caterpillars and send them to their nephew in Texas where he's got milkweed and he finishes raising the caterpillars. And once again, from an ecosystem perspective, I don't think that's a smart move. So once again, I don't see anything wrong with raising caterpillars. How much help it's going to be to the overall population, I'll be honest, I don't really know. Okay, like I said, here at Butterfly Ridge, we raised about 75 last year. An additional 75 in the population that went down to Mexico. Probably not going in the long run, probably not going to make any kind of an impact on the grand population numbers. However, if there's a couple thousand of us that raise 75 each, well, that might actually put a dent into things. So, that kind of depends how you look at it. So, but once again, if you're going to raise monarchs, do it smartly. But once again, I wanted to bring up some of these issues. One of the things I have found this entire time since 1997 that I've been working with monarchs, butterfly people in general tend to be really good people. Okay, there's a lot of monarch people that are really good people, but for whatever reason, there's a branch of the monarch, of the human monarch community, that tends to be very alarmist. And so, like I said, I've been hearing that the monarch sky is falling for 22 years now. Okay. And even, for example, like I mentioned, they're saying that this year at the overwintering sites in Mexico is potential to be the best year since 2008. And I'm hearing people say, you better hurry up and get down there because it's never going to be this good again. Once again, there's that whole alarmist attitude coming in again. Okay. In the early 2000 teens, 2010 to 2015, we had some pretty lousy monarch years tucked in there. And I'm sure that there were people probably saying a 5-hectare monarch population in Mexico was never going to happen again, as they're standing there looking at a 1-hectare population. Okay, well, they were wrong. Okay, now scientists are claiming this year the population estimates that I'm hearing, rumors, is that it's going to be up in the neighborhood of 5 hectares. Yet they can't be joyful about that. Then they have to put an end note on there. It's never going to be this good again. Okay. See, just like in California, we have a really bad year in California. The population's down 85%, and they're going extinct. Well, keep in mind, I think it was 2007 and 2009. There were some pretty bad years tucked in there too, yet the population bumped back up. So once again, just have a little faith. The system works. And if you really, really want to help monarchs, the key thing is creating habitat. Okay, that's the key. Planting the milkweed, preferably native milkweed, native perennial milkweeds. Planting those native perennial wildflowers that are good nectar sources for monarchs. That's how you're going to best help them, is by recreating that habitat. It's not by suing Monsanto. It's not by getting monarchs listed as threatened or endangered. And it's not by throwing up your hands saying, oh, the sky is falling. Okay, that's not going to cut it. So just some words to think about on these cold winter snowy days here. And we look forward to you coming out in 2019, enjoying our milkweed that we have here. Hopefully we'll have another good year for monarchs here. And so stay warm, and we'll see you next Monday. Bye.